Okay, so this woman, Congresswoman, asked Mr. Grush, who's allegedly the whistleblower, what about extraterrestrial bodies? And he goes, I can't discuss this in a public setting. So continue.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Okay, so biologics, those are extraterrestrial bodies, so-called extraterrestrial bodies. Are they extraterrestrial? No, they're interdimensional. They're dispensable. They are the grays. The grays, in my opinion, are constructs. The grays are avatars in which the demonic entities, which, by the way, demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, they inhabit the grays. How do I know this? Whitley Strieber talks about it. Preston Dennett in his book talks about it. Other witnesses that have been on board have come to me and said, it's really weird. The grays are like stacked up like cordwood. How is it possible? They're avatars. They're avatars. So it doesn't matter if a saucer crashes or whatever and they recover bodies. No. They're avatars, in my opinion. Let's continue.
외계인은 타락천사입니다. 그렇다면 타락천사의 시체가 나온다는 게 무슨 소리일까요? 천사는 죽지 않죠. 그런 존재의 시체가 있다는 것은 앞뒤가 맞지 않습니다. 사실 이 외계 존재의 물리적 실체를 우리에게 제시하는 것에는 공중권세 잡은 자의 사악한 의도가 있습니다. 이는 우리의 구원관을 뒤틀기 위함입니다. 우린 여기에 대비되어 있어야만 합니다.
I said, well, is there any way I could get a copy of the PDF of the book since it was pulled so quickly? And he surprised me by sending it to me. You read through that book and he makes the case that the Nephilim are what today we would call aliens, right? And he even makes the case that this represents a high angelic order, that they're going to be coming back, and they could be our saviors. But then he goes further, and let me just get this to you very quickly. When I ask him, does the Vatican's top astronomer actually mean to say that the Nephilim from the Bible are an example of the kind of space saviors that we could soon look to for salvation? He sent me his book, and he highlighted this part of his book where that incredible association is only surpassed by this. And here's what he says, and I'm quoting from his book. In quoting John 10:16, which says, "And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd." And then Consul Magno follows that by saying this: "Perhaps it is not so far-fetched to see the second person of the Trinity, Jesus, the Word, who was present in the beginning," John 1:1, "coming to lay down his life and to take it up again," John 10:18, "not only as the Son of Man, but also as a child of these other races." So then I emailed him back and I said, literally? Really? You're telling me Jesus is the star child of an alien race, that the Immaculate Conception was actually an abduction scenario in which aliens took Mary and impregnated her with this divine seed? He wouldn't answer. No more questions following that, but it's in his book. And I have sent that book to different people who've asked for it, but when I make that assertion, they're like, you've got to be putting me on. Yeah. But it's his words, it's in his book. And I think they pulled it because it was right at the same time they're coming. They might be our saviors, like you just said a moment ago. We're not going to be baptizing them. They're going to be baptizing us.
바티칸은 계시록 17장의 음료입니다. 이미 교황은 2014년부터 외계 존재의 세례를 언급하며 이러한 사태를 준비해왔습니다. 외계 존재에 대한 이야기가 나오자마자 우리가 세례를 주니 저들이 세례를 받니만이 곧장 세례와 구원 문제부터 들먹이는 것으로부터 외계의 사체와 함께 기독교를 공격할 적그리스도의 내러티브가 무엇인지 짐작해야 합니다.
Bring it full circle, Daniel also says that Antichrist will be a worshiper of
a God his fathers did not know.
A God his fathers did not know. And I once asked Michael Heiser, I said, I read a translation once that said he will be a worshiper of an alien God.
Yes.
And I said, is that an accurate translation? He said, it could be translated that way.
Yeah.
So here comes Antichrist. The Vatican's going to help him, I guess, with his alien invasion, and will be a worshiper of an alien God.
그의 조상들이 알지 못하던 신에게 금문 보석과 보물을 들여 공경할 것이며 그는 이방신을 힘입어 크게 견고한 산성들을 점령할 것이요. 토마스 혼, 데렉 길버트 같은 학자들이 지적하듯이 마지막 시대의 미혹은 외계인 내러티브와 함께 오게 됩니다. 바티칸은 이미 그 준비를 진행하고 있고요. 외계인의 사체에 대해서 히스토리 채널 등에서는 이미 에인션트 에일리언 같은 초대형 시리즈를 통해 판스페르미아설, 이른바 지구 생명체의 외계 기원설을 기정사실화하는데 박차를 가하고 있습니다. 외계인 내러티브가 기독교와 상관없고 종말과 관련 없다는 태도가 얼마나 위험한지 알아두셔야 합니다. 진화론에게 이미 아이들을 빼앗긴 기독교가 이대로 이 문제를 무관심하게 방치한다면 외계인 내러티브에게 나머지 사람들마저 다 빼앗기게 될 것입니다. 이는 또한 초자연적인 세계관을 전하지 않는 대다수의 대한민국 교회의 아킬레스건입니다. 이대로는 외계인의 등장과 함께 로마 카톨릭이 주도하는 종교통합 물결에 모조리 휩쓸려가게 될 공산이 큽니다. 노아의 때와 같이 인자의 임함도 그러하리라. 네피림과 노아의 때의 연관성을 이해하지 못하고 DNA 변형이 하이브리드의 등장 및 짐승왕국 시대와 어떻게 연결되는지에 대해서 성경을 거듭 연구하지 않으면 우린 이 시대의 미혹에 모두 다 굴복하고 말 것입니다. 누가 어떻게 하여도 너희가 미혹되지 말라. 먼저 배교하는 일이 있고 저 불법의 사람, 곧 멸망의 아들이 나타나기 전에는 그날이 이르지 아니하리니. 멸망, 파괴로 번역되는 아폴레이아, 아폴리온의 아들은 배교 이후에 등장합니다. 만약 외계인 내러티브와 함께 기독교의 배교가 본격화된다면 어떨까요?
One of the reasons why a lot of Christians are troubled by the idea of whether there could really be aliens or not, either in the past or in the present, is that, well, the Bible doesn't describe them, the Bible doesn't mention them, and so that becomes an argument against the idea, so that if they showed up, ooh, that troubles us, there goes our Bible out the window because the Bible never said anything about that. So they'll take a stand that it can't be true because of absence in the Bible. Well, if you really think about it, that's a pretty poor argument because the Bible doesn't mention a lot of things that we know are real, like cars or microwaves or toilet paper, okay? There are lots of things that aren't in the Bible that we just know are real. God doesn't have to tell us everything he does, everything he did or will do. And we're back to the whole, it's not in the Bible, so it can't be real kind of argument, which again is flawed. The Bible is not a record of everything that God has ever done or will do.
And the other statement that has been made that was intriguing to me and it's intriguing because my view has been that we are billions of light years away from any other system. And the concept that an alien species that's technologically advanced enough to travel billions of light years gets here and somehow is incompetent enough to not survive Earth or crashes is something that I find a little bit far-fetched. And with that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
Yeah, to answer your first question, and I'm here as a fact witness and expert, but I will give you a theoretical framework, at least to work off, to kind of espouse crashes, regardless of your level of sentience, right? Planes crash, cars crash, n number of sorties, however high, a small percentage are going to end in mission failure, if you will, as we say in the Air Force. And then in terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, the framework that I'm familiar with, for example, is something called the holographic principle. It derives itself from general relativity and quantum mechanics, and that is, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a scientific trope that you can actually cross, literally, as far as I understand, but there's probably guys with PhDs that we could probably argue about that.
이번 미국의 UFO 청문회에서 주목할 만한 점은 외계인의 사체와 함께 이들이 초차원적인 존재일 가능성을 내비쳤다는 점입니다. 외계의 존재와 함께 차원적 특성을 들고 온 것은 이들이 우리와 같은 물리 법칙에 종속된 존재가 아니기 때문입니다.
Moreover, there's another problem. The faster the velocity you move through interstellar space, the more damage you're going to do to your spaceship from the particles that are there. Now, it is true that interstellar space is essentially a vacuum, but there are particles there. There's at least one proton every cubic centimeter. And so that's not a lot, but when you're moving at 10% the velocity of light, that particle is hitting your spaceship and doing a lot of damage. And yet I'm aware that there could be civilizations that are far more advanced than us, but however advanced they are, they're subject to the laws of physics. And the laws of physics basically say if you got a physical craft, it's going to get damaged by those particles. And they say if you go, say, 20% of velocity light, the damage is going to be 4 times greater because the damage goes up with the square of the velocity. And so people have figured out, and I wrote in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, maximum velocity you could travel if you're trying to put beings our size inside of a spaceship is about 1% the velocity of light. And we've already determined through searches for extraterrestrial intelligent life, there's nothing within 250 light years, which means you're looking at 25,000 years to make a one-way trip. A mission that's being planned right now to visit that nearest exoplanet. But they quickly realize what it's going to take to send a machine to visit that planet and send back information that's worthwhile. And they quickly figured out, okay, if we send a big spaceship, it's going to get destroyed by the particles. It's got to be a small enough spaceship that it can escape particle destruction. And they've determined that the largest spaceship they can send is 10 centimeters across. Anything bigger than 10 centimeters will be destroyed before it gets there. And even when it's 10 centimeters, the odds aren't good. So the plan that's being proposed to be funded by US taxpayers is to send 1,000 spaceships to the nearest star where each spaceship is no bigger than 10 centimeters with the expectation that at least half of them will be destroyed. The other half will be damaged, but they'll be damaged in different ways. And so enough spaceships will get there that they will be able to send back useful information to planet Earth. Mind you, it's going to take 4.25 years for the information to be transmitted back. But this is a serious mission that's being planned. And as an astronomer, I'm all in favor of it because we can actually put stuff in that 10 centimeter capsule that's going to give us information we're not going to get any other way. And incidentally, it's relatively cheap. They found a way to mass produce these 10 centimeter diameter spaceships. And the propulsion is also cheap. So don't worry too much about, it's way cheaper than the James Webb Telescope by a factor of 10,000 times. So, but that basically tells us whatever's behind the UFO phenomena, they're not physical beings like us. It's something else.
이미 수십 년간 UFO를 연구해온 과학자들은 외계의 존재가 물리 법칙에 종속되지 않는 존재, 성경적으로 말하자면 영적인 존재에 해당한다고 알고 있습니다. 하지만 진화론적 세계관에 위협이 되는 이러한 실체를 그대로 이야기할 수는 없죠. 해서 들고 온 것이 차원의 개념입니다. 지난 10수년간 시뮬레이션 이론, 멀티버스, 다중우주 개념과 촉근 이론이 널리 퍼진 것은 절대로 우연이 아닙니다. 이러한 차원 개념의 내러티브가 충분히 성숙해진 이후에야 이들은 비로소 외계인 카드를 본격적으로 꺼내들기 시작했습니다. 다른 차원과 멀티버스는 사실상 영적 세계에 대한 유물론적인 해석입니다. 비슷한 개념을 말하긴 하지만 엄밀히 따져보면 틀린 개념이죠. 특히 이는 적그리스도의 가장 강력한 무기로 추정되는 거짓 영생, 불멸 개념과도 이어지는 부분입니다. 이미 양자역학을 통해서 영적인 세계를 물리적 언어로 유물론적으로 해석하려는 움직임이 나오고 있습니다.
The assumption is basically this, that your oikotarian is just the body. And the soul and the mind, they classify the mind and the soul as being similar. It's not quite how we would understand it biblically because the spirit merges with the soul, which is part of this world. And then the mind, it comes from the merging of the soul and the spirit. But they say the soul and the mind are the same thing, and that the body is like a sleeve. That you can replace a new body, transfer the consciousness, but you can only do that within the physical world. And if you notice, they never talk about the spirit. Everything in polytheism downplays the spirit because that comes from God. It's only about the soul that's part of this world.
It's like,
again, if you understand their understanding and their language, you start to know what they're talking about. So when they look at a spirit angel, it has no gender, but they can choose a gender. So if you're going to be a little god and raise yourself up to be that level, this in this analogy through the soul versus the spirit, which permits you to choose your gender, you can be gender fluid, which is the other doctrine that they're starting to enter, that you can change your understanding of your gender as you go through your life. So that's that whole sort of complete allegory of their doctrine.
it's going to make it look so sexy to those who are already deluded and are confused. It's going to make it look so sexy to them.
Yeah. They can't talk about the spirit because then it would make their belief system look inferior.
Yeah, it's very much like the same idea behind. There's actually a fantastic anime called Ghost in the Shell, where people they upgrade their bodies into like android type bodies or robots, and they're just depositing the soul from one into the other. Same with the show Altered Carbon, where they actually called their bodies sleeves. Yeah.
더그리스도는 전 지구적인 위기를 해소하면서 등장하여 전 3년 반 기간 동안 평화의 사자를 연기합니다. 실제로 짐승 정부 기간 동안 자연재해는 계속될지언정 과학은 발전하고 사람들은 해당 인물의 통치 기간 동안 안정감을 느낄 겁니다. 그때의 적그리스도가 종교를 통합할 가장 강력한 무기이자 큰 표적과 기사, 할 수만 있으면 택하신 자도 미혹해하는 최종 병기는 물질 세계에서의 영생이 되리라 봅니다. 그때 적그리스도는 영, 혼, 유기 개념을 비틀어 양자 역학과 같은 최신 과학 이론으로 영적 세계를 일종의 다른 차원의 개념으로 또는 영을 제외한 혼과 유기 개념으로 뒤바꾸어 설명하고 그 증표로 다른 안드로이드 육체로 사람의 의식을 넘기는 등 놀라운 표적을 보일 것입니다. 계시록 18장 13절에서는 짐승왕국인 바벨론에서 사람들의 혼, 즉 푸시케가 실제로 거래될 것이라고 이야기합니다. 초자연적 세계관 없이 이 구절을 보면 절대로 이와 같은 해석에 도달할 수 없고 적그리스도의 최종 병기 또한 전혀 알 수 없게 됩니다. 이로 인해 적그리스도가 성도들을 이기는 것입니다. 전 3년 반에 등장하는 바다 짐승은 성도들을 죽이지 않습니다. 단지 성도들과 싸워 이길 뿐이죠. 실질적인 대학살은 후 3년 반 기간에 땅의 짐승이 등장하면서 시작됩니다. 땅의 짐승은 첫 번째 짐승인 바다 짐승의 우상에게 경배하지 않는 모든 사람을 죽입니다. 진짜 짐승의 표도 이후 3년 반 기간에만 시행됩니다. 7년이 아닙니다. 666도 땅의 짐승의 숫자이죠. 적그리스도, 바다 짐승은 용에게 권세를 받고 말하는 입을 받습니다. 이를 놓고 보면 그의 가장 강력한 무기는 공포가 아닙니다. 새로운 세계관과 거짓 표적, 즉 양자 역학과 같은 유물론의 세계관에서 완성되는 물질 세계 속에서의 영생입니다. 이러한 세계관 앞에 모든 종교가 무너져 내릴 것입니다. 외계인의 사체도 어쩌면 이와 같은 거짓 표적을 위한 예행 연습 내지는 일종의 기술 테스트는 아니었을까 생각해봅니다. 하지만 그레이라고 불리는 이 외계인에 대해서는 좀 더 논의를 해볼 필요가 있습니다. 이 외계인 사체의 정체를 좀 더 알아봅시다.
Hey, Carl, good to talk to you. Thanks for taking my call, brother.
Oh, it's my honor, Josh. Thanks for having me.
You're a very well-known pastor here in America. You've written several best-selling books. So talking about the alien abduction phenomena, what do you make of that? Is this demon attacks? Is this hallucinations? Are these actual aliens abducting people? What do you make of the whole alien abduction phenomena? When Tim was here, he had a different idea that they might not be demons. I don't know if you're familiar with how he talks about it, but what response would you have to that theory?
Parallels between that and current UFO lore seems to be very similar,
Yes.
which might then be suggestive that both the phenomenon is real and that it's been going on for a very long period of time.
Is there anything within either alien abduction scenarios or the UFO sighting scenarios where something like higher dimensions would be a better conclusion to draw rather than extraterrestrials from other planets?
In my book, demons and fallen angels are two different entities. Demons are the disembodied spirits of a Nephilim destroyed in the flood. That's what demons are. They are earthbound. Fallen angels are fallen angels, part of the heavenly host that was created and rebelled against the Most High God. There's a word called metaschismatisai in the Greek. And we know that from the Bible, Satan can appear as an angel of light. So he's able to metaschismatisai, change his appearance and look however he wants, male, female, whatever. The symbol of Baphomet is a perfect example. It's a chimera, it's a woman, it's a man, it's a goat. What is it? I would propose to you that Baphomet is the spirit of the age. Baphomet, that's where we are. Terrifying.
The alien abduction question probably really came into the public focus with the Betty and Barney Hill case. This was a couple, they were musicians, they were traveling home from a gig, and they described being pulled over in their car with a flying saucer. They got out to see it, and then they kind of had a blackout and wake up with kind of vague memories of being aboard a flying saucer. Now, since then, there's just been a multitude of cases. People claiming to be abducted out of their beds at night, out of their cars, from all sorts of different situations. There's a question of, is this really physically happening, or is this a dream, or is this some kind of vision? But there seems to be some of both going on, but some of the cases that I've examined, the spouses or significant others report that the person is actually physically missing. So I don't think we can explain it all away as visionary. The fact that something very real is going on has been confirmed by quite a few researchers. Probably one of the most prominent would have been Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack, who really risked his career to study this, and Harvard even put him up for review over this. He had to defend himself, and he was exonerated. He determined that there is a very real phenomenon going on. The extent that it's physical or spiritual, is debatable, but I think the fact that it's real is undeniable.
I'm Nick Pope. I worked for the British government for 21 years at the Ministry of Defence, which is the UK's equivalent of the Department of Defence in the US. I was a civilian. I was there for 21 years, and for much of the early 90s, I was posted to a division where my duties included researching and investigating the UFO phenomenon, and my mission was to analyze the data and assess the defense implications of UFOs. Very few, maybe none, of these strange phenomena, whether it's UFOs or alien abductions, have a single cause. I suspect that when we talk about UFOs and alien abductions, multiple things are going on. Some of them prosaic in terms of the explanations, other things may be anomalous. With UFOs, for example, one can say that a lot of it is misidentifications, aircraft lights, satellites, meteors, weather balloons, etc. Same thing with alien abduction, alien contact. Some of these experiences at the very extreme end of the spectrum will simply be fabricated. Other abduction experiences might be attributable to a combination of vivid dream, hallucination, things like that. Then you get to the anomalous end of the spectrum, and of course many believe alien abduction in the literal sense is simply extraterrestrials taking people against their will physically on board a nuts and bolts spaceship. And that's certainly one possible interpretation of the data, but there are other possible answers to this. Some take us to interesting territory like other dimensions, parallel universes, the whole spiritual realm. There are interesting parallels, for example, between the alien abduction experience and the shamanic experience, the shamanic journey. With shamans, they get into the shamanic state however they do it, whether it's through dance or whether it's through taking various substances, hallucinogenics, and they enter this other realm. Some people who have no interest in UFOs or abductions have done this for themselves and gone into that same trance state, and they have accessed something. And it makes one wonder, is there another realm out there that can be accessed in a number of ways? Is it what modern science might call hidden dimensions, parallel universes, or is it something else, something that at present we have neither the words nor the concepts to understand or describe?
When we get down to the double or triple handfuls of what seem to be real brain twisters, like, all the tests you can run on these people have been run, and they seem to be sane and rational people, and they keep coming up with the same stories. That gets a little freakier to people. So let's just pretend like, for the sake of this conversation, that those are absolutely real, and that experience actually happened to these people. So then what's the explanation? I think it's demonic. I truly do not think it's actual physical humanoid type beings from other planets that have developed the technology and the curiosity to be so far more advanced than we are to come to us for the sole purpose of trashing the gospel of Jesus Christ and examining us sexually and messing with our minds and terrifying us. More than likely, biblically speaking and even scientifically speaking now, we are dealing with interdimensional experiences of some kind of an entity, and I would say an evil entity, and I would say that would be demonic.
Contrary to popular conception, aliens are not demons. I can say that unequivocally. We know what demons are within the biblical context. According to the Hebrew tradition, demons are the disembodied spirits that proceeded from the Nephilim when they died in the pre-flood age. The demon is a ravenous wraith. Its only desire is to inhabit a body of flesh through which it can interact with the material world. These entities were cursed to be bodiless wraiths that would wander the earth and would feel all of the desires of the flesh. They would be hungry, they would be thirsty, but they wouldn't be able to eat or drink or satisfy their fleshly desires. Every time that we encounter demons in the New Testament, for example, they are these savage, ravenous, foaming from the mouth entities. In the case of the Gadarene, who was demon-possessed, it was said of him that he would scream in the tombs and he would break his chains. He was a very ravenous person because he was demonized. There was a legion of demons inhabiting his body, his biology. They want to feel once more the fabric of the physical world from which they were banished. The manner, the disposition of the gray alien is totally antithetical to a demon in the traditional sense. I think that if we were to try and contrive the most unattractive body for a demon to inhabit, we couldn't do any better than a gray alien. The gray aliens are stoic. As far as we know, they don't eat or drink in the way that we do. They absorb nutrients, most likely. As far as we know, they do not have sexual organs, and their disposition is robotic. You have to imagine gray aliens abducting people and bringing them on board these alien crafts. Sometimes there's hundreds of people laid out on tables, and the grays are kind of like the worker bees conducting the different procedures related to the abduction phenomenon, which are sexual in nature. So you have to imagine these little stoic gray aliens walking around among sometimes hundreds of naked bodies, incapacitated, laying on tables. Somehow we think that these are demons, or that they're flesh suits for demons and they're able to restrain themselves, you know, and because again, all a demon wants to do is fulfill the lusts of the flesh. Basically, you would be trapped inside of this stoic little creature that doesn't even if you could, even if you wanted to, you don't have the reproductive organs to even engage in the satiation of your sexual desires. You're literally in the most unattractive body you could possibly imagine if you're a demon. So I don't think that demons have anything whatsoever to do with gray aliens.
Fallen angels, again, can appear as angels of light. They're not going to go, hi, I'm a fallen angel and I'm here to kill you. They're going to lure you in. Every abductee I've ever talked to, they've always been told, right to the ego, they have a special purpose. They've been singled out. You have a very special mission. You must fulfill it. And meanwhile, they're wasting away to nothing, literally. They're losing weight, they're not sleeping, they're obsessed with this thing, and that's how they lure you in. The demons that are disembodied and that possess people, that's a whole different deal, isn't it? They're foaming at the mouth and are absolutely crazy. So fallen angels that appear, they're not our friends either, don't misunderstand me. But they seem to have a different agenda or be able to present themselves in a way that is more palatable to humans, whereas the demonic is the demonic.
The Bible tells us there's the angelic realm, there's the demonic realm, there's power behind it. Satan is called the prince of the power of the air. There's technology behind it. There's some kind of terrible, terror-invoking deception. The Bible says that. I think those kinds of verses, studied in their context, may point to some type of a UFO disclosure. And a lot of ufologists who have spent decades believing that it was humanoid beings from other planets have now backed way off of that and have gone on public record saying, after all these years, we believe these are entities that have always been among us, probably interdimensional, probably malevolent. They have nothing good designed, and several of them, who I don't think are even believers after reading their biographies, say this phenomena we now believe is more in line with what the Christians would call demonic activity.
If we take those things that are larger than us, larger than man's reach, and just lump that and call that the macrocosm, we suddenly are confronting astronomy, astrophysics, those kinds of things. The great discovery of 20th century science is that the universe is finite. It may be expanding, but it's finite, and that has staggering implications. That means it has a beginning, and it'll ultimately have an end. If we go the other way, looking at what's smaller than man, call that the microcosm, that gets even weirder, because you and I would think that if we took, say, a piece of string or something, and we cut it in half, we would take whatever we have left, cut it in half again, and at least maybe not physically, but conceptually, you think whatever we have left we can cut in half. It turns out, we discover, shockingly, that when you get 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, and you try to divide that, what we have there loses a property called locality. That observation has actually been proven in the laboratory. They actually demonstrated non-locality. Every photon in the universe somehow is directly connected to every other photon. That defies our normal thinking of space, if you will. What we call physical reality has a limit in smallness, whether it's length, mass, energy, or time. It's made up of units that you can't divide. So there's a limit to smallness. There's a limit to largeness. What we call physical reality is a digital simulation. There was an article in Scientific American, June of 2005, which was dealing primarily with the fact that constants in physics seem to be changing, but they make the observation that's profound, that if the constants of physics are changing, that implies that our physical reality is a shadow of a larger reality. And I was blown away when I first saw that, because that's exactly what the Bible's been saying all along.
Let's suppose we are dealing with intrusion. Think of it as a doorway, a gateway, a portal. Every door is basically a two-way affair. So if with UFOs and abductions, we are dealing with what you might call leakage or something coming through, then it works both ways. You can go into this realm, and something can come out of this realm. And maybe that's an interesting way to think of the entire range of paranormal phenomena, that it's a sort of leakage from these other dimensions, these hidden worlds.
What contactees describe as extraterrestrials may fall into two categories: demonic entities that have been given physical form, and there are some who believe that the alien grays are meat suits that have been genetically created to give physicality to these spirits. That's the thing with demons. They cannot manifest physically in our world. In the case of the alien grays, it almost appears as though they were created for these suits. Now, I don't have an opinion one way or the other definitely on that issue. I would suggest that some of the other entities that have been observed by contactees appear to be fallen angels, and they can manifest in our space domain. In the Bible, they're always described as humans. The book of Hebrews tells Christians that we can entertain angels unawares. The way they are described in the oldest Sumerian texts and iconography are very often theriomorphic. That means hybrid animal-human. And that's what we see in many of the accounts from contactees. Mantids, things that look like insectoids, if you will, or reptilians. Interestingly, the experiments by Dr. Rick Strassman with DMT, the so-called spirit molecule, with volunteers in Arizona, they encountered similar entities, things that looked like humanoid crocodiles who were not happy that the volunteers were entering their time-space domain. Is there some connection there between the spirit realm and what contactees are reporting? Yes, I think so. And I think that when we compare this with older descriptions from Sumer, Mesopotamia, of denizens of the spirit realm, bison men, scorpion men, fish men. I think there's something there. I think those who are being contacted are seeing both demons that have been enfleshed somehow and fallen angels.
We're not necessarily dealing with one straight explanation, one neat solution here. There may be several things going on. And for people who say, oh, this is all just science fiction, actually it's not. And very often things that maybe a few years ago might have been more sci-fi are now quite sciencey. Other dimensions is a very good example of that. Some of the string theory, for example, needs the existence of these so-called hidden dimensions for the equations to actually work. And scientists, including the great theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, are actively looking for these hidden dimensions right now at places like the Large Hadron Collider in Europe. A spiritual or occult explanation of UFOs and abductions is quite possible, and one of the figures, I think, who's often overlooked in all of this is the great magician and occultist Aleister Crowley. One only has to look at that drawing, that famous image of Lamb, this entity that he says that he encountered. It's the archetypal image of an alien grey, really, or it's the prototype of an alien grey. So the idea that there are these entities that through magic, through witchcraft, through the occult, can be summoned or decide themselves to come through some sort of portal into our world. That's interesting, and one person's demon is another person's grey. It's all a question of language and perception. If you are asleep in your bed and you see a shadowy figure across the room, how you interpret that will depend on your belief system, your culture, your knowledge. So to some people it will be a ghost. To others it might be an angel or a manifestation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. To others, it might be demonic. To others, it might be extraterrestrial. But these are just our words and labels. The reality of these things may transcend all of that. There may be more fact to this than people realize.
여러분은 어떻게 생각하시나요? 저는 개인적으로 그레이는 타락천사의 장난감, 즉 하나님의 창조를 모방한 일종의 모조품으로 봅니다. 악마가 빙의했다고 보기에도 애매한 부분이 있고 타락천사는 결코 아닌 것 같습니다. 성경의 곳곳에서 등장하는 천사의 모습은 인간의 모습이니까요. 해서 그레이 외계인은 타락천사들이 하나님의 창조를 모방하여 만들어낸 유기적 모조품이 아닐까 합니다. 인간이 인공지능 로봇을 만들어내듯이 타락천사들이 자신들의 기술로 지적 생명체처럼 보이는 이 기묘한 존재를 만들어낸 것은 아닐까요? 그가 권세를 받아 그 짐승의 우상에게 생기를 주어 그 짐승의 우상으로 말하게 하고, 계시록에 나오는 이 부분을 만약 인공지능 로봇이 아니라 정말 그레이 외계인과 같은 존재를 만들어 작동시키는 것으로 이해한다면 충분히 가능한 해석 같아 보입니다. 이러한 그레이를 어떻게 만들었을지는 다음의 내용을 참고하시길 추천합니다.
March, April. Also in April, Tucker discusses cattle mutilations and the UAP connections. Now, again, if you never heard of cattle mutilations, this is something that we did a program on, and that'll be coming out eventually. But the FBI did official, I mean, is the FBI going to get involved and crank things? No, they're not going to waste resources, but they investigated thousands of cattle mutilations beginning back in the 80s and 90s, and that's a whole other program. But Tucker now, he comes on and he's discussing cattle mutilations officially and the connection specifically with UAP. Talk about that.
Cattle mutilations, I remember reading about it and seeing Linda Moulton Howe's award-winning documentary, Strange Harvest. This is back in the 90s. I'm researching for my first book from Zondervan and Nephilim, the first book of the Nephilim trilogy. It's a novel. And I'm watching this, and I'm watching 10, 15 minutes at a time, and I'm turning off and walking out of the room because it was so disturbing. And there's nothing, folks, there's nothing in your grid system which prepares you for this. Nothing. And that's why when you watch it, it can be incredibly disturbing.
And it's a fact. This is FBI documented. It's a fact. And let me just say one thing about that, and then you can continue. The FBI concluded this wasn't some cult out in the middle of nowhere. They're like, no, this is not. The mechanisms of how these things happened were beyond explainable.
We don't have, the cattle are carved up with surgical precision. The predators, the coyotes, vultures, ravens, won't get near it.
They won't eat it.
They won't eat
They
it.
won't eat it. There it is.
Wonder
Like,
why.
yep.
Wonder
They will
why.
not eat it. We don't
Yeah,
know
the
why.
cows
Yep.
distance themselves from where the mutilated cow is.
So how did Tucker present it?
Well, he had two butchers on, and they ping-ponged and showed a few of the, certainly not the most graphic.
Thankfully.
Because some of the stuff is like really disturbing. And the fact, this is why it's deliberate. When a rancher comes out and sees that cow mutilated like that, they're terrified. They're confused, they're terrified, they don't know what to do. Law enforcement comes out, they take some pictures, nothing ever happens, they never find the perpetrators. They see lights in the sky, some of the ranchers report that. Next day they come out, there's the cattle, completely drained of blood. The jaw's excised, eye is removed. The butchers on Tucker Carlson, circling back to Tucker, stated on the record that this is done, they're butchers.
They know.
They know.
Yep.
They're working with really sharp utensils. This is beyond anything we can do, and we're professional butchers. Whoever's doing this is something that you would see in an operating room. It's done surgically. It's something else to think about, folks. You can go online and see it yourself, that bovine blood from cattle, is often used, can be used, not often, but can be used in human transfusions. And this goes right back into the breeding program, where the women are, and this is conjecture on my part, but this is based on me being submerged, if I can use that word, in the phenomenon literally for decades. Women are taken, they become pregnant. In the third month of their first trimester, the third month of the first trimester, they're taken, re-abducted, the baby is taken from them. Other abductees report seeing different babies in different forms, stages of growth, immersed in some sort of a liquid in a container. That's an artificial womb. The bovine blood, in my opinion, is used in those artificial
nutrients
wombs.
and stuff.
That's what it's used for, in my opinion. Can I prove that? No, I can't. But that's based on, that's me connecting dots.
We're trying to,
from,
we're doing the best
from
we can.
research. It's conjecture, and that's why, take it with a grain of salt. There's a caveat there.
하지만 외계인의 종류가 꼭 그레이만 있는 것은 아닙니다. 인간과 똑같은 형상을 가진 존재도 있고, 성경 속 하나님의 보좌를 지키는 천사의 형상에서 케루빔, 세라핌, 오파님처럼 인간형이 아닌 피조물에 대해서도 우리는 알고 있습니다. 인간과 동물이 섞인 듯한 존재들이죠. 그리고 이번에 공식적으로 인정된 외계인 사체, 즉 그레이와 같은 타락천사의 장난감처럼 보이는 존재들이 있습니다. 세상에서는 아마도 이런 다양한 실체들을 각기 다르게 진화한 외계인 내지는 유전자 변이 내러티브로 이해하려고 할 것입니다. 세상이 이것을 어떻게 정의 내리든 여러분은 성경적 세계관으로 이들을 바라보시길 바랍니다.
About it. If you had the same vocabulary that we use in religious discourse, God, Jesus, salvation, humanity, destiny, transcendence, glorification, heaven, all these things, but they all had different meanings that attached themselves to this whole extraterrestrial question. Well, guess what? You get to keep your Bible. We don't change any of the words. However, what the words mean is something different. This is something akin to, conceptually at least, when the Nachash, the serpent, walks up to Eve and says, hey, did God really say? And then they have a conversation where Eve is misled or misdirected, led to process what God said in a different way. In our theological discussions of today, we almost let science fiction, and the ET thing is part of that, dictate the way we talk theology. Science fiction is like televangelism for the alien worldview. Again, we get to keep God, that inner urge to have something more transcendent than we are, that will give us a destiny, that has the solution to our problems. We get to keep all that if what we're talking about are extraterrestrials. Isn't that wonderful? It's all real. It's all true. But in doing so, in keeping it and having the language redefined, having the meaning of these terms altered, even slightly, we are embracing a non-gospel. We are embracing a different Christ. And I think that's actually the goal.